So back whenever I was in my high school days and I finally get over my Battlefield, my tap revenge phases like all the other teens in 2010, I decided to get back into some of those sweet old Nintendo games. Yeah, for some reason I just like really fell off of Nintendo for a few years. I'm not really sure what happened there. I probably just got caught up in being a nice, young, law-abiding citizen, in case my mom's watching. So around the time of 2011 or so, I remember hearing that there was like a new Zelda coming out, and I remember thinking, well, I like Zelda. So I checked out all the trailers for it, and like most people who hadn't been completely and utterly scarred by motion controls at this point, I got super hyped for it. The game looked fun, I loved the art style, Nintendo was going the extra mile and putting full motion control support behind it, like what could go wrong?
And you tap the A button to shoot. Nope. Oh. These are some fast spiders.
My anticipation for this game had built up for months, and the time finally came. I was gonna go get The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword for the Wii, and no one was gonna stop me. So I called the local Walmart because neither one of the GameStops in town were having a midnight release. Like, imagine that. It didn't have the words Pokemon or Call of Duty in the title, and they weren't having a midnight release for it. So that night, me and my brother hopped in the car at around 11 o'clock, drove over to the nearest Walmart, walked back to the game section, and then we waited. 6 people showed up, it was magical. Now, as sad as that sounds, it was actually my first midnight release that I ever went to, and I'm always gonna remember that. Yeah, after that, I did actually end up going to a few other ones for like Super Smash Bros. For 3DS. That one was pretty fun. I went to the Black Ops 2 release whenever that came out. That was insane. There were so many people out there, and we were having these like Nerf gun fights in the parking lot while eating McDonald's. God, we were so concerned for our health. But there was something special about standing in line with those 6 other people who were just pumped for the new Zelda game. Like, it was just intimate. We got to have these real conversations, discuss our hype for the games, talk about the meth heads over in the dairy section. It was awesome. And then I got home and played the game. So here's my first experience with Skyward Sword. I took it home, I played it for an hour, and then me and my brother fell asleep on the couch because it was so damn boring. Now, eventually, yeah, I got through the rest of the game, and honestly, I actually kind of had a pretty good time with it. But after playing the HD version for a few hours, holy hell, I love this game. How did I ever even possibly stick with that pile of shit back in 2011? I would never say that I was part of the crowd of people that like hated this game back when it came out. I mean, yeah, I always felt that it was flawed, and there's definitely a reason why it's like one of the only Zeldas that I've never gone back to since. But for the most part, it was a solid enough game for me. Like, I think the biggest complaints that I personally had about the game were the motion controls got old after a while, and the pacing of the game was a fucking train wreck. Luckily, Skyward Sword HD fixes both of these problems. Kind of. So in the very first trailer that we saw for Skyward Sword HD, we knew that, oh, hey, look at that. There's a new control scheme. So right out of the gate, they're addressing problem number 1, which most people had with the game, which was the control scheme. Whenever I first picked up the game, I just immediately went to the button control scheme, and I actually played it for like 5 or 6 hours before I remembered that there were motion controls that I should try out. So I decided to try them. Yeah, they're fine. It just kind of feels like it did back in the day. Like, I never thought they were horrible or anything, but I never really got that crazy into it. So for the most part, using the Pro Controller has been like a godsend for this game. Like, I love having pretty much all my control mapped to the left stick, and I don't have to use motion for like anything. The only time I use motion is whenever I'm using gyro, whenever I'm trying to aim the slingshot. I forgot what a slingshot was called for a second. But one thing that's taken me nearly 10 hours of play to get used to is the camera. This is a huge addition to this game. I kind of forgot that the original version didn't have it because it's just so embedded in my brain at this point that all modern games have camera control, and it didn't have it. And I can't even imagine how I played it back then without having it. So the weird thing about this version is, because I'm playing with the Pro Controller and I'm using the button controls, I have to use the right stick at all times for the sword. So if I ever want to control the camera, I have to hold down the L button. And it's terrible. I can't even begin to tell you the amount of times I accidentally drew my sword and was flailing it around because I'm just so used to just whipping the camera around back and forth in modern games and I don't have to worry about it. So getting used to like preemptively holding a button before I do that it's so hard. It's kind of funny playing this game, which is clearly meant for motion controls. Like the game was designed around it back in the day. Just kind of get its entire identity ripped out by just having button controls now. It feels so weird using the right stick to swing the sword, but at the same time, it just feels so right. You simultaneously have like an extremely large amount of control over your sword, and at the same time, you're still flailing it around like you have like a problem with your arm. One thing I've just never been able to get used to whenever I'm playing this game is how Link looks while he holds the sword. I mean, yeah, I get it, but like, does that look natural to you? Now, as much as I love this new control scheme in this game, the problem with it is, it makes the game way too easy. Skyward Sword was made at a time where Nintendo was trying to be as aware of its audience as possible. Now, since this was made during the Wii generation, Nintendo was concerned that there were quite a lot of people that might pick this game up who hadn't really played a Zelda game before, which explains a lot of the explaining and the padding and the incessant need to tell me what a blue rupee is every time I turn the game off. And because this game was designed around the motion controls, that added just a little bit of difficulty to the game because you had to fight enemies in almost like this puzzle-like manner. So many of the enemies in this game actually move and shift their bodies to block your attack, so you actually had to think about where you're attacking them and how you're attacking them, because you couldn't just walk up and just have a waggle at them like you're at your 6th grade birthday party. Because the controls back then were far from perfect, this just added that much more of a difficulty curve to the combat, and it made the game just that much harder. But because I use an analog stick now to fight enemies, this is how most of my encounters go. Now, I'm not saying that I need all my games to be like Dark Souls or anything like that. Dear God, no thank you. But I do appreciate having a little bit of challenge. And Skyward Sword HD has basically not challenged me at all so far. Yeah, I'm having fun. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm enjoying myself so far. But I've never once been concerned about my surroundings. And even when I have like 3 hearts left, I'm just sitting there thinking, I'll be all right. I will say one thing though. It's a lot easier to stab people in this game now. My parents are so proud of me. One thing I've always loved about Skyward Sword is just how freaking goofy it is. I mean, near the beginning of the game, there's like this moment where the big birds, I can't remember their name, they like fly over your head in this Blue Angels like formation. Loft wings! That's what they're called. They like fly over your head in this Blue Angels like formation, and it's just so, like, what? I just love how much personality everyone has in this game. Like, I love how just like cheeky and in your face the salesman here is. I feel like he has an actual job title, but I'm struggling to remember that. And then you got knockoff Sephiroth over here who looks like he wants to watch the world burn, but he's actually supposed to be like an instructor. Just like all my middle school teachers. I don't know if I'm actually in the minority on this, but I've always loved Skyward Sword's art style because of this. Everything is so expressive and almost like painterly-like with this aesthetic, and I can't get over it. It's just so pleasant to look at. One thing I will never get used to though is the faces. Some of them are bad. I mean, they're not like Xenoblade on the Wii bad, but they're not far off. I mean, Link especially has some moments where it's like, you got big creep face there, brother. Groose kind of makes me think of Blue from the original Pokemon. Like, he's just a rival that exists purely out of spite towards you and to make you hate him, and he plays the part so perfectly. I love him for that. It kind of makes sense though, because this is supposed to take place at a time whenever this Link is a student of the Knights Academy, so like it would just make sense that he'd have some sort of like stupid teenage rivalry to go along with that. But Groose's entire aura about him it's just incredible. Daisy, quick! Give me your thoughts about Groose! Looks like even Daisy can't contain herself. Now, earlier I said the pacing of this game is like a freaking miserable nightmare, and I definitely meant that, like, don't get me wrong. In the original release of this game, you were constantly getting stopped by everyone in this game, and it was just this massive annoyance. So now, you have this indicator pop up whenever someone wants to have a conversation about like a potential side quest or something, and this is way nicer, because now so many of the encounters with people are entirely optional, which is nice because it doesn't completely grind the game to a screeching halt. Now on top of that, Fi, I don't know how to say it, who's basically just this game's version of Navi, was always telling you way too much information about where to go, what to do, how to wipe your ass. it was just too much. Now she still has times here where she halts the flow of gameplay, but it's usually just regulated to like whenever you feel like you actually might need help, like whenever you enter a new area or something. So I don't really hate her as much now, just a little bit. Now, like I said earlier, I've always been a pretty big fan of Skyward Sword's art style. It kind of felt like a natural evolution of the Wind Waker art style, because Wind Waker went like full-blown cell shadiness, whereas this one's like, all right, we're doing a little bit of that, but now we're kind of going with this watercolor aesthetic, and I've always been way more of a fan of that personally, probably due to like my art background or something. I don't know. I'm so bad at watercolor, so I don't really know why I'm even bringing that into play. But like the visuals here lend themselves so well to being upgraded to 1080p and 60 frames per second. It's like this game like looks like how I remember it looking back in the day, but now I go back and look at the Wii version and I just think, that's cute. I got one of her little plastic parts out of one of her toys that squeaks. She's not very happy about it. Let's wrap this shit up. Yeah, don't get me wrong, like the sneaky ninjas at Nintendo, they're not selling you a new game with this one. I mean, this is still basically the same game that you popped into your Wii 10 years ago. But now that they've toned down all the annoying garbage, it just lets me experience mostly the good of this game. And all that stuff shines so much brighter now, like the dungeon design and the art style and the music. The overall presentation of Skyward Sword is still so unmatched, and in a time after Breath of the Wild, it makes me appreciate traditional Zelda dungeon design just that much more. Here's what I would say though. If you like hated the game when it first came out, you're probably not gonna feel all that much different when you play this. I mean, you might feel a little bit different, but I'm not gonna sit here and say that this is gonna like revolutionize your gaming life and solve world hunger. But if you were like me, and you just saw the potential of this phenomenal game hidden behind all that dumb bullshit, then you're probably gonna like this a lot. Skyward Sword HD is a pretty solid port. Like, I'm a little mixed on it. For the most part, like, it's hello. Yeah, the two things I wish I could have fixed more of was like the pacing issues. I mean, they did help that some, but I feel like the pacing on it's still a little rough, and then, you know, the whole difficulty thing. Yeah, what can you do, I guess? It is honestly a pretty good port for the most part, but the only thing that really sucks about it is the fact that they charge $60 for it. You know what else I could have got for $60, Nintendo? 3 years of Nintendo Switch Online. Actually, I think I made the better choice. Oh, God.